SS Iron Mountain. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a river, not just any river, the Mississippi. Wide enough to swallow a city block whole, brown and slow on the surface, but churning with invisible fury underneath. A river that has carried cotton bales and steamboats and broken dreams for centuries. Now imagine something disappearing into that river. Not a rowboat, not a canoe, a ship, a massive 181-foot iron-hulled steamboat with 5 steel boilers and a paddle wheel the size of a barn door. 50 people on board, and then nothing. No wreckage, no survivors screaming for help, no bodies floating to the surface, just the river rolling on, as if nothing had happened. That's what we're here to talk about. The SS Iron Mountain, and the day the Mississippi decided to keep her. It was 1872 when she first came alive. In a Pittsburgh shipyard, on the banks of the Ohio River, the sound of hammers never stopped. Sawdust filled the air. Men worked by firelight when the sun went down, because the man who had ordered this ship didn't want to wait. And when she finally slid into the water for the first time, everyone who watched understood why. She was enormous. She was beautiful. And she was unlike anything the western rivers had ever seen. The Iron Mountain, named after a range of hills in Missouri, was built for a company called Gray's Iron Line. She was 181 feet long, 35 feet wide, and 4 stories tall. But what made the old-timers lean in and whisper wasn't her size. It was what was hidden in her belly. 5 steel boilers. Steel, not iron. This had never been done before on the western rivers. Those boilers were custom built by Park Brothers and Company, each one 40 inches wide and 26 feet long. The rivermen looked at them the way you'd look at something you weren't quite sure was safe. New technology has a way of making people nervous, and they were right to be nervous, though not for the reasons they imagined. For years, the Iron Mountain earned her keep. She ran up and down the Mississippi hauling ice and grain, barge after barge lashed to her stern, fighting the current in both directions. She saw the river in all its moods, the glassy stillness of a summer dawn, the terrifying walls of floodwater in spring, the frozen silence of January, when the whole world seemed to hold its breath. Her captains and pilots knew every sandbar, every hidden snag, every treacherous bend by heart. They knew the river, and they trusted the ship. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that the Mississippi was watching and waiting, because rivers have patience, more patience than any of us. The morning of March 25th. It was a Tuesday morning, early March, 1882. The kind of morning where the mist sits low on the water and you can't quite tell where the river ends and the sky begins. At the Vicksburg wharf, the Iron Mountain was loading up. Cotton bales came aboard, wrapped in burlap and smelling of the deep south. Barrels of molasses rolled across the gangplank. Blocks of ice, cut from northern lakes the winter before, were packed into the hold. 5 barges were tied behind her. Thick hemp ropes looped and knotted, so loaded down with cargo that the water line crept just inches below the deck. More than 50 people moved about the ship. Deckhands, engineers, the cook, paying passengers. A normal morning on a working river. A little after 8 o'clock, Captain John Greenough gave the order. The paddle wheel groaned, then began to turn. The river foamed white behind her. The ropes between the ship and her barges went taut, then held, and slowly, the whole long procession pulled away from the wharf. A few dock workers lifted a hand in farewell. The Iron Mountain didn't look back. She was headed north, towards St. Louis, a routine trip. No one on that dock had any reason to think it would be the last time they'd see her. A few hours later, north of Vicksburg, the river gets complicated. There's a place they used to call Stumpy Point, near island number 102. The current picks up there. The river bottom shifts after every flood, throwing up new sandbars and burying old ones. And beneath the surface, invisible to every pilot, no matter how experienced, there are always snags, trees torn up by the roots, their branches pointing upward like fingers in the dark. The Iron Mountain hit one of them. Nobody saw it happen. One moment, the ship was cutting through the water. The next, a sound, a deep, grinding crack, and then water coming in fast, too fast. Rivermen know what that sound means. They don't panic. They move. Someone grabbed a knife and cut the barge ropes. Just like that, 1 slash per line, and the 5 barges were free, drifting away on the current. Nobody's problem anymore. Most of the crew jumped with them. They floated south on the barges, wet and shaken, but alive. Most of them. One person didn't make it off the ship, a woman named Ellen Anderson. She worked as a stewardess on the lower decks. By the time anyone could have gone back for her, there was nothing left to go back to. The Iron Mountain sank. The river closed over her the way a mouth closes over something it intends to swallow whole. The brown water smoothed itself out. The current kept moving, and in the space where a 181-foot steamboat had been floating just minutes before, there was nothing. Not a plank, not a barrel, not a ripple out of place. The Mississippi had taken her, and the Mississippi had no intention of giving her back. 5 barges and no answers. Later that same afternoon, a steamboat called the Iroquois Chief was heading south when her pilot spotted something strange up ahead. 5 barges, drifting, no crew, no tugboat pulling them. Just 5 heavily loaded barges, moving with the current, going nowhere in particular, like something that had been set loose and forgotten. The pilot slowed down, pulled alongside, had a look. The ropes were cut, not frayed, not snapped under pressure, cut, clean. He recognized the barges immediately. Anyone on the river would have. They belonged to the Iron Mountain. He looked north. The river was empty. No ship, no smoke rising from twin black stacks, no sound of a paddle wheel. Nothing. 50 people. One of the biggest steamboats on the Mississippi, and not a trace. When word reached Vicksburg, the city went quiet in that particular way, that bad news makes things quiet. Search boats went out immediately. They combed the banks. They circled the islands. They dragged hooks through the mud. Newspapers ran the story on their front pages. The Vicksburg Daily Commercial, the Memphis Avalanche. Telegraphs clattered all up and down the river. Experts were consulted. Theories were offered. The first theory was the most practical. The ship had driven herself into the mud, and the Mississippi's famous silt, that thick, heavy sediment that has been building up for 10,000 years, had simply covered her over. It sounds impossible, but on this river, it isn't. The bottom of the Mississippi near Stumpy Point can swallow something the size of a barn and never show a sign. The second theory was darker. River pirates. The 1880s Mississippi was not a safe place after dark. There were men who made their living by worse means than hauling cargo. Some people whispered that someone had boarded the Iron Mountain, done their work, and cut the barges loose to slow the investigation. What happened to those 50 people in that version of the story, nobody liked to say out loud. The third theory was mechanical. Those 5 steel boilers, the first ever used on Western riverboats, remember, had never really been tested the way a decade of hard service tests a machine. All it takes is one pressure valve failing at the wrong moment, one crack in a seam, and then you don't have a steamboat anymore. You have a fireball, something that could tear a 181-foot ship into pieces, small enough for the river to carry away in minutes. And then there was the fourth theory, the one who people brought up quietly, almost embarrassed to say it. A tear in time, a fold in reality. The Iron Mountain, they said, had slipped through some invisible door in the fabric of the world and come out the other side, somewhere else, or somewhen else entirely. I'm not asking you to believe it. I'm just telling you that even the sensible theories left the same question unanswered. Where was the wreckage? When a big ship sinks on the Mississippi, the river always gives something back. Timber, cargo, personal belongings, bodies, always something. From the Iron Mountain, the search teams found almost nothing. And almost nothing from a 181-foot steamboat with 50 souls aboard is, for all practical purposes, nothing at all.
The cotton field. 3 months later, the Mississippi flooded. That year, 1882, the river rose higher than anyone could remember. It didn't just overflow its banks, it kept going, spreading inland for miles, turning Louisiana's flat cotton country into a shallow brown sea. And then, slowly, the water pulled back. A farmer in Louisiana, near a place called Omega Landing, walked out into his fields when the mud was still damp. And he found something in the dirt that had no business being there. Pieces of white painted wood. Big pieces. The kind of carved, decorated timber that comes from a ship's stateroom. An iron bracket. An icebox half buried. The flood, the official report eventually said, had carried wreckage from the Iron Mountain through a break in a levee, pushed it 20 miles inland, and deposited it in this man's cotton field. That was the explanation. Here's the question nobody could answer. For 3 months, 50 people and a 181-foot steamboat were completely, utterly missing from the Mississippi River. And then a flood came along and casually left a few pieces of her in a farm field 20 miles away. How? The official inquiry wrapped up. The newspapers moved on to other stories. The Vicksburg wharf kept loading and unloading other ships, and eventually the Iron Mountain became the kind of thing people mentioned in passing. You know, that boat that disappeared. But the story refused to stay buried. In 1956, a writer named Frank Edwards put it in a book called Strangest of All. He got some of the details wrong, or perhaps he chose to leave the inconvenient ones out, but the core of it was there, and readers couldn't get enough. The book sold hundreds of thousands of copies. After that, the story took on a life of its own. Paul Begg wrote about it in 1979. Reader's Digest included it in a collection of unexplained mysteries in 1982. Louis L'Amour referenced it in a novel. Charles Berlitz added it to his catalog of the world's strangest events. Each time the story was told, it grew a little. The facts got softer around the edges. The mystery got a little darker, a little deeper, a little harder to explain. But here's the thing that stays with me. You don't need to exaggerate this story. The real version is strange enough. A ship full of people left a busy port on a clear morning and vanished from a river that thousands of people lived and worked on. No mayday, no explosion heard from shore, no survivors washing up with a story to tell. The river simply took her. The wreckage in the cotton field explains some of it, maybe. But it doesn't explain where the hull went, where the boilers went, where the pilot house went. 3 months of searching and a lucky flood produced a few boards and an icebox. From a ship the size of a city block. That's not an explanation. That's just a different set of questions wearing an explanation's clothes. The Mississippi River is still out there, still moving, still brown and slow on the surface and furious underneath. Vicksburg is still there. Island number 102 is still there. And Stumpy Point, somewhere under that restless water, is still there too, holding whatever secrets it was given to keep. As for the Iron Mountain, maybe she's still in the mud, buried so deep that no one will ever find her. Maybe she's scattered across 100 miles of riverbed. Maybe she's in that cotton field in Louisiana, roots growing through what used to be her hull. Or maybe, just maybe, she's somewhere the river's current doesn't reach. The Mississippi isn't saying. It never says.